Alrighty, welcome. My name is Jeremiah. I'm one of the teachers here at Practice Indy, and today we are here to do a bake-along. So today we are making gingerbread. So the recipe is going to be down below, but either way, I'm going to go ahead and review the recipe line by line. So first and foremost, you need to make sure you have 2.5 cups of sifted flour. Make sure you have 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1.5 teaspoons of ground ginger, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of softened butter, 1 cup of sugar, 3 eggs, 1 cup of molasses, and 3/4 cup of hot water. Now the hot water, on the other hand, you're not going to need until later on, so make sure you have a kettle or something handy where you can heat some water, but we'll need that later on. And then also you'll need some heavy cream, confectioner sugar, and vanilla extract. So we'll be making whipped cream to go with this as well. So you get a 2-for-1 special. So first and foremost, you need to make sure you preheat your oven to 375, which we'll do that right now. All right, oven, check. All right, then first and foremost, you start with a 9x13 pan, which you will grease. So I use my grandmother's trick of using Crisco. You take it with a paper towel. This way it doesn't get all of your hands and your hands don't get very greasy. You just take the pan, Crisco, and you grease the pan like so by just taking the Crisco or butter or whatever you want to use. You can always use nonstick spray. However, the recipe does call for flouring the pan as well. So you grease and flour. So Crisco is kind of like the easiest way to do that. So go ahead and grease it up, smash the Crisco all around. And then what you do is you take a little bit of flour and you take the flour, just get a little bit in that pan. And then you take it and you kind of get it all around. And then you get it on the sides by kind of going like this. And then once you're done with all of that excess flour, you will take and you kind of just toss into the trash can, which I'm doing right here off screen, which you can't see. And then also it helps if you do the flouring of the pan over the trash. That way, if any kind of escapes the pan, you don't have a very large mess. All right. Pan is now ready. Great. And you start off with either, you can have a stand mixer, you can do it in a bowl, whatever you prefer. But I'm going to take my softened butter, 1 cup, which is 2 sticks, toss them into the stand mixer. And I'm going to get that started. Just mashing around, getting it started. And then I'm going to add sugar. Add that sugar in there. That way you can cream them together. Now, creaming it is pretty important. You want to make sure that it's nice and smooth texture before you proceed further. So we're just going to let that kind of do its thing. Now, really important to take note of is occasionally you might have to take your spatula and kind of scrape down the sides of the dish. The reason why is because sometimes, especially with this model, things can kind of get like, off the side or they get caked in the bottom. So sometimes you just need to come back through, scrape things down, get it nice and ready. Scrape it down, and it does its thing once more. All right. Now, it's got a pretty smooth texture at this point. So now what we're going to add is the eggs. Now, my preference here is that the eggs be at room temperature. Why? It just makes sure that everything is going to be, when everything's already the same temperature, they mix easier. So to prepare for this video today, I actually had everything sitting out for a little bit, kind of coming to room temperature. That way everything would be, all the temperature I like it to be. All right. So it's doing its mixing thing right now. And once more, I'm going to have to do the spatula for the sides thing because there's butter and sugar all over the sides, and I need to mix in with the egg. Otherwise, it will not turn out well in the oven. There we go. All right. So while it's doing its mixing thing, we go ahead and we just take inventory of what we got over here. So you need to make sure you have all your spices handy. So you're going to need your ginger, your cinnamon, your nutmeg, your salt, as well as the baking soda. So this is looking pretty good right now. So I'm going to turn it off for a moment while I add everything in. So we are going to start with adding in the 1.5 teaspoons of ground ginger. Toss that in. Get it all in there. Great. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to add 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. In it goes. The thing about cinnamon is it's usually very fine powder, so it can kind of create a bit of a cloud if you're not careful. And then also we want to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. Boop. In it goes. And then also salt. Salt is really important here. So you want to have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I use kosher salt. You can use any kind of salt you have handy. I would recommend the kosher salt, kind of that Alton brand method there. And then also we're going to add in the baking soda. Let it do its thing. All right. And very slowly turn the mixer back on because these spices are dry powder. So we want to make sure we don't have a cloud come up. So once it starts mixing, you can kind of increase the speed a little bit. All right. It looks like it's mixing in really nicely, but again, things are on the side. So I want to go ahead and scrape that down, make sure all that ooey gooey goodness gets into the middle. And really important there, sometimes if you have a stand mixer like I do, you want to make sure you kind of scrape down the paddle or the hook you're using, just to make sure everything gets into where it's supposed to be. Because you don't want to have a batter at the end that kind of has chunks still in it that aren't mixed well. All right, so it's doing its thing right now. And at this point, we are going to very slowly add in the flour. Now I say very slowly because lessons learned from past experience with this recipe is if you add it in while it's moving, while it's mixing, whew, you have a cloud and then you have flour everywhere. And flour is kind of hard to clean up. So instead, we're going to lower the bowl. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to slowly add a little bit of flour at a time and let it incorporate in. Start very slow, let it very slowly work its way in. And while it's doing this, let's go ahead and start heating up the water because we're going to need that right now. So I've got my kettle right here already ready. And then while it's doing that, we're going to incorporate the rest of the flour. We're not going to mix the flour all the way in, not yet. Why? Because this is a very dry recipe at this point. It doesn't have all the wet ingredients. It still has, we still need to put the molasses in there, as well as that water, which will add some extra liquid, which it will need. So we're going to very slowly raise that bowl back up, get the incorporation started for this. And like I said, sometimes a bit of a cloud, so you just keep your rag handy to just do some quick spot cleaning. All right, it is just now starting to come together and it's very thick. So at this point, the mixer is going to really start to struggle because it's very thick. So now water's going, molasses is already right here. We're gonna mix the 3/4 cup of water in with the molasses. So we will go ahead and grab a 3/4 cup. And in my case, I have a 1/4 cup, so we'll just measure out 3 of these. And we'll add that in there. And we want to make sure it's mixed in with the molasses. So we're going to reuse the bowl we just had here. And we're going to add in the molasses, pending the water. So let's go ahead and grab our rubber spatula here. Get that molasses all in this bowl. And that hot water is going to help render down the molasses to the point where it's going to be very, very loose, very runny, which is exactly what we want. Because we don't want this to be going into this batter nice and thick, because we're trying to loosen up the batter, not keep it thick. All right, that is on the ready side. Sounds like that is heating up almost to the boiling point. So if you use boiling water like I do, just make sure you give it a moment to cool down as you mix everything together with the molasses. Caution here, because there's egg in here. If you add the hot water immediately in, the eggs will start seizing up, and then it makes the recipe a little funky. However, thing to note is, the minute this is fully done mixing, it goes straight into the pan, straight in the oven. The reason why is because it starts the cooking process, and we want to make sure it is going to be cooked the appropriate time, not too long. So it sounds like this is just about to start boiling. So I'm going to add in 3/4 of a cup of water. So that is going to be number 1. Number 2. And 3/4 of a cup, not a drop more. All right, it is doing its thing. So let's go ahead and very slowly, I use the rubber spatula for this as well. I just nice and slow, nice circular movements. Then eventually I start working back and forth, making sure all of the molasses in here are starting to melt a little bit, kind of add in nicely with the water. You move very slowly because this is hot liquid. And if it splashes up and over the bowl onto you, it will hurt. So we want to make sure that we are nice and gentle. Make sure we are observing proper safety precautions. And it is doing its thing. It is just about ready. All right. So, like I mentioned earlier, once this goes in here, goes into the mixing bowl, and you really start incorporating that, it'll become a very loose, very thin batter. That's okay. You might feel like, oh, I need to, feel the urge to add more flour or something to thicken it. Don't. So from here, we're going to put it straight into the pan once it's done. That's why you flour, you grease and flour that pan early. That way, by the time you get to this point, you don't have to worry too much about pausing when this is a critical point in the baking process. You already have it ready. So this is ready. So we're going to add a little bit of this in. All right. And then you're going to very slowly turn this on. Because you're adding liquid to a very dry thing, it might splash around. So you want to make sure you use this on a low setting. All right. And then slowly add a little bit more in. Add a bit more in. And it's getting a little more loose, getting very thin. Splishy, splashy. Add a little bit more in. And until it is just about done. And again, I said it's splishy, splashy. It is very splishy, splashy, very loose. So we're going to very slowly, on setting 1, let it mix a little bit more. Takes a minute. Sometimes the stuff gets caught in the paddle. It has to kind of release. So it's about to do that. I'm going to very slowly go up to one speed and the other. All right. You don't want to overmix it. Let that come down. All right. Now, we want to scrape down that paddle very quickly. Be very expedient here. Remove the paddle if possible. Start scraping it down, getting all the batter that you can so none is wasted. All right, it is ready to be poured. So once more, you want to really very quickly scrape from the bottom. Make sure you can quickly, one last incorporation, just in case the paddle missed something. Let's go ahead and get this in here. I am pouring it into the prepared baking dish. All right, so this recipe calls for a 9 by 13 for a reason. This recipe will puff up pretty quickly once you get it in the oven. So that being said, maybe you want to make it, you have like a beautiful bundt cake pan you want to try, or maybe you want to try, a decorative dish you might have. That's perfectly fine. Just recognize that it has to be the same volume as a 9x13, otherwise it will spill over. So at this point, take this, pop in the oven. It is going into the preheated 9x13 preheated oven at 375. Perfect. All right, so while we are waiting for that to go, it is going to be a 35 to 40-minute bake time. We will go ahead and have your smartwatch or whatever, smartphone, or your Amazon lady, if you have an Alexa, have them set a timer. So in this case, I'm going to say, hey Siri, set a timer for 35 minutes. Starting the low time. 35 minutes and counting. You start in the low end and then you work your way to the 40. You want to make sure you check it early because this is the recipe that has a lot of, it's going to have a higher sugar content because the molasses and the sugar. It has a propensity to kind of start to get black and char, so we don't want that. So we want to make sure it stays nice and even. So at this point, we are going to migrate ourselves into making the whipped cream. At this point, you are going to need 2 tablespoons of confectioner sugar. You will need 1 teaspoon of the vanilla extract, and then you'll need 1 cup of cream, which is going to be in the fridge. So we are going to take this, and I'm going to reuse the same bowl I used for the batter. Sometimes you might want to wash it, maybe you don't. It's going to be going to add a little bit extra flavor here. I find nothing in here is can't be eaten raw. The eggs have been pasteurized, so they're safe. This will add a little bit of ginger flavor to the whipped cream we're about to make. So let's go ahead and swap out the paddle. You want the paddle for a whisk. So we are going to toss that in here. There we go. Let's go ahead and grab that heavy cream. All right. Shake, shake, shake. Brand new whipped heavy cream. So opening it up. There we go. All right, I'm going to mix it one more time. All right, so we need to have 1 cup. I already have my cup right here. So let's go ahead and add 1 cup heavy cream. There we go. All right, 1 cup heavy cream. And that was a little short, so let's add a little more dash. All right, 1 cup heavy cream. And from here, you raise your mixing bowl if you have not already. And you add in confectioner sugar. My preference is confectioner sugar for this because you won't get those granules there. And we want that 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I've got that right here. There we go. So let's go ahead here. Start slow. You want to incorporate that confectioner sugar first, the powder, so you don't want to have it cloud up on you. So once it starts to really mix in, go ahead and just increase the speed of the mixer. And eventually you're going to turn it all the way up to the highest setting because you want to make sure you get it going until it gets stiff peaks. All right, it is doing its thing. So it's going to take a little bit of time. So if you're doing this at home with a stand mixer, you can kind of let it do its thing. If you are at home and you're using a hand mixer, you're going to have to just rotate the bowl around, make sure you really get all sides of it to let it all incorporate and mix in. So it's already getting thick at this point. It's nowhere near done yet. But you're going to notice that 1 cup volume right here is going to very quickly turn into something much bigger. So it's thickening up. It's doing its thing. It's getting there. It's getting there. So at this point, you want to just start gathering all the dishes you might have used. Maybe start getting them ready to go in the dishwasher or in the sink. So in this case, I'm going to start moving things around. It's getting very thick at this point, so it's not quite there. All right, it is just about there. Just a few more moments here. And we're going to grab a new rubber spatula for this. Let it do its thing. I do need to scrape the bottom of this because I did notice as it was doing its thing that it was not necessarily getting everything from the bottom. So I'm going to very quickly just stir, stir, stir. And I'm going to set this back on to keep going for just about 1 to 2 more minutes. All right. So as you can see, it's about the right consistency. It's almost there. All right. Let's see. Almost there. Almost. All right. 10 more seconds here. All right. There we go. This looks wonderful. So when you do this, I'm going to put this off to the side so it doesn't fall. There we go. Then it just, here we go. Hopefully it just stays there and doesn't move. Take this up and over as well. Bang it off. As you can see, it's nice and thick. I'm going to bang it off this. And then now you can kind of see what we're looking at. See, nice and stiff peaks, doesn't fall anywhere. All right. So we're not going to go ahead and have you kind of just wait 35 minutes for it to be finished baking because I already have one done. I already made one earlier today. So this is what it looks like. So this is the completed product. There you go. So this is what we've got right here. This is the gingerbread recipe. So what you do now is you go ahead and you take this and we are going to cut a small piece. So I want to show you what it's going to look like when everything is all said and done. There we go. And I highly recommend letting it chill all the way, as in like cool, not chill. But you want to let it come to complete room temperature, and then you will have it ready to go. All right, as you can see, here we go. Nice gingerbread. So let's go ahead and get a little plate right here. And let's go ahead and, there we go. And the reason why you want to really use the Crisco and the flour as well to give it some release here. So here you go. Nice gingerbread. Get a good feel for it. And the way you eat it is whipped cream. Boop, right on top. And voila, there you have gingerbread. All right. So this is my grandmother's recipe. So this is something that I make usually every year. And over time, you know, recipes do change, but this is one that I usually keep the same. I usually like to play around recipes, like to tinker. This is a recipe that I usually don't tinker with. Everything stays exactly the same. I think because if I were to tinker with it, especially when it comes to ginger and the flavoring there, if I were to substitute things out, like maybe whole wheat flour instead of regular flour, the taste would be off. So if you want to tinker with it, feel free. You have some license. But I would recommend staying true to this one. This is one of those, you know, just typical holiday style recipes. So at this point, now that we have that nice and done, we can't exactly let you guys go without tasting it though. So hopefully by now, maybe you've come back to the recipe and you come back to the video and you have something to try with me. So let's go ahead and take a bite here and a little bit of whipped cream. Great. Tastes exactly like my grandmother used to make. So one of those nostalgia pieces here. And it's a wonderful way to also get a lot of dessert, or a lot for a lot of people, for fairly low effort. As you can see, right now we are not very far into as far as time goes in the video. So there we go. That's our bake along. So again, thank you so much for being here with me. And Stay tuned for more videos to follow. All right. Happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays.